All right. So for our today, what we want to do is we want to just spend a little bit of time talking about the upcoming third essay and introducing the prompt for that, and then also the prompt for the research project. So you're going to see these under this module for class. The third essay is not going to be due for the final draft's not going to be due for another couple weeks, right? Just to kind of give you a heads up of what's coming between now and the end of the semester is basically like we're getting fairly close to the end, and so we're going to be working on turning in the third essay, which is analyzing a topic from Born a Crime. And then we're going to be working on putting together our research project. And then that'll take us to the end of the semester. Typically, what I try to do is I try to have the research project due before finals week. And the reason that I do that is because it'll give you the opportunity to be able to, if there's finals for other classes that you have to study for, you don't have to worry about studying for a final for this English 1 class. Instead, your research project is your final project for the class. And so you'll have some time into finals week to actually turn in the paper if you need that extra bit of time. But I have the regular, so I'm willing to take them into finals week, and I'll give you due dates and everything when that time comes. But I like to have it due a little bit before that, just because, and can take them before that because it gives you the opportunity. I know for some of you who maybe are taking like, I don't know, like a chemistry class or something like that that has like a big comprehensive final, this will give you the opportunity to spend that time in finals week like really crunching and studying for that test if you have your essay turned in a little bit earlier for this class. So we'll talk about essay number 3. We'll talk about the research project, how to get started with the research project. And then on Thursday, I'll have my regular office hours if there's times where you want to stop in and ask any questions in detail about these assignments, or how to get started with either the essay 3 or the research project proposal. We'll talk about that in some detail. So in our module this week, here's the breakdown for essay number 3. Essay number 3 is going to be based specifically off of Trevor Noah's book, right? Over the past few weeks, I've been reading through it and kind of exploring some different topics, issues ranging from language, from environment, the impact that the socioeconomic status has on Trevor's life, the impact of family, the impact that, the language he speaks, his culture has on his life. And so this essay is going to give you the opportunity to be able to pick a topic of the ones that we've been kind of exploring and dive deep into it and analyze it. To be able to write this essay, you'll have to have finished Trevor Noah's book, right? So that's the first part of this week's work, is to finish his book. If you're behind on his book, right? If you're in one of those situations where maybe you're behind on the reading, before you start working on this essay this week, biggest piece of advice that I could give you is to finish his book. So this is one of those things where it's going to be really, really difficult, if not impossible, to be able to pass this essay without having his book completed. So I'm not looking for quotes and ideas from his book from like the beginning of the book to support your argument. These prompts are developed in a way where they're going to be requiring you to use examples of his ideas and arguments from his book throughout the length of the book to be able to effectively build your argument. So just know that, like, if you haven't finished the book yet, or if you're significantly behind, I would really, really recommend using this week to dive into the book, make sure that you get all the reading done before you start working on the essay. So there's going to be 3 different options for this essay prompt, and directions where you could go. If there's a different direction where you want to go, I'm always willing to give you that freedom to be able to write about something that interests you that maybe doesn't fit within these 3 options. If that's the case, please shoot me an email, or you can meet me in my office hour on Thursday, and then we can talk about what you were thinking about doing for this essay. And then, just like I've done with some of you in the past, I'll kind of okay it. We'll talk about the essay idea a little bit, and then you're free to start working on writing that. But again, if there's a different option or direction that you want to go with this essay that doesn't fit within these 3 possibilities, just get in contact with me and let me know, and we can talk about what direction you might go with writing that essay. So here's essay prompt number 1. So Trevor Noah argues that one's dreams and ambitions can be limited by the environment where he or she lives, right? And he talks about this on page 73 of his book. So focusing on Noah and or other people in his novel, for this essay, you're going to be analyzing the impact that environment has on one's sense of self. Were people in this book limited or controlled by their surroundings? And make sure you cite specific examples to support your essay. So this doesn't have to just focus on Noah himself, right? I mean, we could talk about ideas of focusing on like his mother specifically. You could focus on, uh, Abel. Like there's other characters, other people in his life that can really kind of focus on this idea on the impact that environment has on one's life. If you want to focus specifically on the impact that it has on Noah's life, that would work great too. But I just wanted to give you some freedom in here to know that like Trevor Noah's experience is not the only one that you have to be or that you're able to explore. That if you wanted to focus specifically on how environment impacted his mom, all the way up through the relationship that she had with his stepfather, um, looking at how environment played a role in a lot of things in her fate, I think that would be a really compelling essay to write. So it doesn't have to focus just on Noah, but what it does have to focus on is your analysis of the effect that environment has on people's sense of self, on people's ability to be able to find kind of whatever their version of that success is, or to be able to the effect that it has on one's ambition, right? So that's the first essay prompt.
I would say a good thing to look out for here is Trevor Noah goes through like quite a few different places throughout the book, and look at like the kind of description that he talks about and like the different environments that he goes through, and kind of like how that impacts him and the people that are living in that environment is a good like place to think about for this prompt.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? And you can also kind of like even contrast some of those, right? Like here's what it's like in one environment versus another one, and maybe that you see a difference, right? Like he talks about how his mom, like early on in the book, like made that decision to grab a hold of, that kind of like bottom rung of the white collar world. Or like it's like how much can I stretch myself into this next environment, and how much of a drastic impact does that make on my family's life, right? So that's a really great point. Essay prompt number two. Because of his misethnicity, Noah refers to himself as a cultural chameleon, right? And he expresses how he was always an outsider. So, how was Noah impacted by being one of the few mixed people growing up in an extremely polarized, right, black and white environment? Did this have positive or negative effects on him? And then make sure you're citing specific examples to support your claims. So, I mean, he titles his book Born a Crime. And a big part of that is this idea of him being in a situation where, it was illegal for there to be, him to be the byproduct of a black and white relationship. But also, like, he's very much so defined by his mixed ethnicity, right? The way that he experiences the world, the way that he, presents himself, the way that other people perceive him, the opportunities that he's able to have in life, the limitations that happen in his life, right? So, very much so, all falls back into this idea. And so, for this essay, I left it kind of pretty open for you to be able to go in whatever direction that you want. That on one side, he's this kind of cultural chameleon where he's able to move in and out between these different worlds. But then on kind of that reverse side of the coin, he also talks about this idea that he always feels like he's an outsider. That yeah, he's able to fit here, yeah, he's able to fit there, but there's also this place where he never kind of feels like there's one place where he truly belongs. So for this essay, you're really going to be kind of exploring like the impact that this had on him, the impact this has on him living in this environment. Do we think it's a positive impact? Do we think it's a negative impact? Is it kind of a mix of those things? So what effect does him being biracial, or him having kind of like this mix, or this even this lighter complexion, if you want to go in that direction, living in an environment that very, very much so is segregated in this very polarized black and white kind of only two ways of seeing something. And then your third essay prompt. So in chapter 5, Noah describes this idea, or defines this idea of the black tax, right? And how the black tax hinders black people's social progression in Africa, specifically like thinking about that in South Africa, right? That he says this idea of like where he really talks about how people are constantly trying to bring people behind them back up to zero. So it's really difficult for them to be able to progress beyond, right? So essentially, Trevor Noah defines this idea of the black tax as how difficult it is for upward mobility to happen, for people to keep progressing, right? This idea that we hope that like the next generation will go beyond where we were, and so on, right? And so that's really discussed on page 66 of his book. So after his mother is shot, right, in the book, he states that his mother's greatest fear was that he would end up paying the black tax and would get trapped by a cycle of poverty. And that happens in page 279 of the book. So, how did Noah's mother's work to ensure her fear not only become a reality, right? So, sorry, I read that word. How did Noah's mother work to ensure that her fear would not become a reality? So, in other words, like, what did Noah's mother do? Like, if she has this number one fear, the thing that she was afraid of most than anything else was that he would have to pay the black tax, right? That he would not be able to escape this cycle of poverty that she saw so many people around her stuck in. So, what did she do to make sure that that fear would not become a reality? How did the close relationship with Noah that she had throughout his life impact him? And so use evidence throughout the book of different things that she was able to do, or the way that she was able to work to try to work her hardest to be able to try to break Trevor out of that cycle of poverty that she feared that consumed so many people around her. So this essay, working on essay prompt number 3, really gives you that kind of to look at his relationship with his mom, right? Like, so much of this book is defined, as much it is a book about, like, you know, living in a polarized community, and kind of navigating this incredibly segregated and racist society. It's also like this really, really powerful book about a mother and son's relationship, right? And so essay prompt number 3 gives you this freedom to be able to kind of explore the things that Noah's mom was able to do with him, the way that she was able to kind of like parent him, the way she navigated the world that she exposed him to, all in an effort to kind of escape this fear that she had for him being stuck in this cycle of poverty. And I mean, clearly, the fact that we're reading his book as a New York Times bestseller, or that we see him in television and that we know who he is, she succeeded in that goal, right? So, what things was she able to do along the way, and why was it so important that she was doing that? So, these are the 3 prompts and the 3 directions that you can go for the essay. And again, if there's a 4th one and you want to go in that direction, just let me know, shoot me an email with some different ideas. We can meet in my office hour and we can talk about that. This book, like I said, it's not going to be due for another couple weeks, right? But this week, finishing his book is the first to be on your list of priorities as far as getting started with this essay. And then the other place that I think would be really helpful for you to be by the end of this week is you should know which essay prompt that you want to focus on, and then kind of start maybe brainstorming some ideas of, here's a direction that you would go for working with this essay, right? And then so if you have any questions and you want to talk through this essay, please stop by and we can meet and we can talk about that in some detail. So the next thing that we're going to see in this week's module is the research prompt. So research project is not going to be due until the end of the semester, right? It's the last thing that you're going to turn in for this class, right? It's kind of our culminating project. It's, you know, the skills that you're getting in LR10, the stuff that we've been working on developing throughout this semester, put together for you to dive in and do some academic research in a topic that stands out to you and something that's interesting to you. So the thing about the research project is from now until the end of the semester, we're going to be working on this project in little chunks, right? There's going to be things that you'll be turning in along the way. There's going to be a ton of office hours that we're going to have that are available for you to be able to meet with us, talk through your research project. The best advice that I could give about working on this research project is kind of approach this research project almost like a mini little marathon, right? That like you're pacing yourself along the way, that you're setting up these little checkpoints for yourself along the way. And your first one will be this week, which will just be simply you deciding what you want to write about. If you wait and try to do this research project at the end of the semester, it's going to feel incredibly overwhelming. It'll basically be pretty close to impossible for you to be able to write this paper that way. Instead, there's going to be little checkpoints that I'm going to have for you on the way, assignments that you're going to be working with along the way, things you're going to be posting on Canvas along the way. And those are all designed as, one, it's work that you have to do to be able to do the research project well. But then 2, it's kind of a way of like chunking this and breaking it into little manageable bite-sized pieces, right? It's kind of like if you're trying to eat some giant piece of food or something on your plate, you don't just try to take the whole thing and like eat it all at once. You cut it up and you eat it in pieces, and then it becomes really easy to digest, right? And it's the same thing with thinking about this research paper. So I'm going to kind of take you through the research topic in general, kind of to think about what it is that you're going to be doing with this paper. And then again, on Thursday, I'm going to have my office hours open. And then also, I think, Chris, you were going to do something on Friday, right? Where they can stop in and talk about the
Yeah,
research
on
project proposal.
Friday, I'm going to host another workshop that'll be open so anyone can come and join, just like I've done previously, for specifically for like coming up with ideas of what you want to focus on for your research paper. So if you're a little bit unsure about what you want to do for your research paper and you don't have any like clear ideas of exactly like what's going to fit best for this paper, come and talk to me. We'll shoot ideas and we'll kind of sift out ideas for the research project.
Cool. That's going to be perfect, right? Because the idea is like this week is kind of figuring out what you would want to write about. So let's talk about this in some detail. So for this research project, you're going to identify a meaningful problem that is faced by people in your community. So this sounds pretty general, right? It's because it's supposed to be. When I say in your community, you can define your community however you want. When it's a meaningful problem, that word meaningful means that it's meaningful to you. It's meaningful to the people in your community. It's meaningful to whatever group it is that you're going to be focusing on, right? Like, I think this is really, really important to think about this idea that like you have freedom with this topic. You're going to be working on this paper for the next handful of weeks, right? And so because of that, I really, really, really recommend that you pick something that is important to you. You pick something that you're curious about. You pick something that you're interested in. Don't pick a topic that you really don't. Sometimes I've had students, they'll be like, I don't know, I picked a topic and it's really boring and I really don't want to write about it. And I was like, well, don't pick it, right? You have freedom to pick a topic of something that's interesting to you, something that stands out to you, something that you're passionate about. Maybe it's something that's a future career goal, or maybe it's something that you have right now as like a current interest or hobby. Maybe it's something that you see affecting your local neighborhood or your city. Maybe it's something that you're just genuinely curious about, but you don't really know a whole lot about it. The idea is that you should pick something that is important to you or that is interesting to you, because it's going to be so much easier to write this paper if it's connected to your interests or to your passion, right? And so definitely like this idea of meaningful is really up to you. And then I'm going to talk about how you're going to be able to define this idea of your community. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be picking a problem faced by people in your community and investigate the background and cause of the problem and learn about potential solutions in order to advocate for that solution. So this essay is going to be set up as kind of like a problem solution type essay, right? So you identify some sort of problem within a community that you're focusing on, right? And then you're going to be researching like, why is this problem there? What has created this problem? And you may not have any idea before you start doing the research. That's kind of the point, right? Research is going to be you finding articles online, you using the databases that was at 10, you diving deep into this topic and trying to understand what is the source of this problem, right? Like, where did it come from? Why is it there? What's going on with it? And then starting to research specific solutions in order to say, here is what I think the best way is to address this problem. I'm asking you to fix any kind of issue, right? Like, I mean, that's a huge goal. Just being able to say, I've identified an issue, a problem within a specific community. I've researched kind of the source of that problem, why that exists, how that exists. And now I've kind of started diving into, here's some ways that we can address that problem or support the community. Here's what I think the most effective way is to do that, right? And all of these ideas, I'm not expecting you to have any of these right now. These ideas will all come from the research that you're doing. For this paper, so much of this research project rests in using into the online databases that you used in LR10, and we'll have some time to work on that in class, right? You'll be posting some of the research that you're finding in what we call source reports that'll have you turn in at different points, right? So this is all stuff that you're going to be doing along the way. And I'll have some a mini lesson where I'll focus specifically on that strategy next week on how to be able to dive into a topic You could bring some of your topics with you. We could do those together, right? So that'll be next week. We'll focus on that. So for the purpose of this project, I want you to feel free to interpret this your community idea any way that you'd like. So here's some different ideas that people have done, right? So for example, you might choose to research a problem faced by students on our campus, right? Maybe specifically think about community college students or a problem that you see addressing people at Solano College. This could be a geographic community. It could be your city, it could be your neighborhood, it could be your state. For example, I've had students do research on focusing on the cost of college tuition, right? And how it affects community college students. I've had students do research on resources that are available for students that are experiencing kind of mental health issues on campus and what kind of resources are available. I've had students do research on students that are experiencing housing insecurity, the problem that many college students are experiencing housing insecurity and what kind of solutions are available. So it could focus on college, for example. It could focus on maybe a geographic community, like your city. For example, like I live in Fairfield, and there's a lot of issues that I'm seeing happen over Fairfield, right? A lot of things where I say, like, here's places where maybe our community is not providing adequate resources that need to be available. For example, if I think about that in the context of homelessness, right? Like when I drive around Fairfield or if I'm riding my bike around town, there's a lot of instances where I see more and more examples of people who are sleeping on the streets, people who are, living in tents along bike trails, things like that. Like I can identify that. I can say within California, it's increasing, right? That problem is there. People are, experiencing homelessness, and it seems like at a rapidly increasing rate. Why is that happening? What kind of solutions are being done? Who's addressing that? That might be something that's interesting to me. Another thing that's happening in my community, and I see a lot of local businesses closing, right? I see empty buildings where there used to be thriving businesses. Downtown Fairfield looks like a ghost town. Why? Right? So this could be something that's important to you because of where you live. Another thing that you can do is focus on cultural community. Maybe this could be focused on religion. It could be focused on ethnicity. I've read really, really powerful papers about people researching things like focusing on immigration and focusing on how people are treated because of like language differences or immigration status, right? This could focus on gender identity. I've read some really powerful papers from people that are writing about a lot of issues that maybe, I don't know, trans youth face within the community and not feeling supported, right? And specifically, I read a paper last semester where a student linked that into the increase in teenage trans people who are experiencing housing insecurity, right? Because of being like turned away by their families who are now experiencing homelessness, right? So I think that like so many different possibilities on where you can go and how you want to define community. I've even seen students take papers and go in different direction where it ties into like personal interests and kind of like personal life experiences to influence community. I had a student last semester who wrote this really amazing paper on her husband is in the Air Force and how she's a military spouse and the kind of, a lot of the anxiety that she faced because of like having to leave her family behind and her home state behind, and then her husband will go overseas for lengths of times, and a lot of the resources that are available and some of the ones that aren't for housing spouses for military spouses. I thought that was a really interesting topic where she was able to take a kind of a personal element of her life and tie that in there. I've had one student wrote this really cool paper, and it's also cool because I like video games, so it kind of tied in really well about like gaming culture and about how like the culture is kind of experiencing like what he calls a problem, which to some people may not be viewed as a problem, but like how a lot of video games are advertised as like being free now, but you have to pay for a lot of things in the game, so you can't really get good at the game unless you pay a ton of money to be able to play it. The reason I give example is because it was one of these examples of a place where a student like really stretched this idea of community and what he perceived as a problem, and ended up finding like this really surprisingly cool research about how they started linking all these like pay to play games into the same psychology that goes into gambling addiction, and how people start to spend tons and tons of money. And there was actually a surprising amount of research within the databases that he was able to use to tie into this topic. So The reason that I'm giving you all these different possibilities is to show that like there are tons and tons and tons and tons of articles that are out there on so many different topics. So please don't feel that you're have to kind of write about a topic that's not interesting to you, an issue that's not important to you. And if there's a, a situation where you're like, I really don't know what I'm going to write about, then talk with one of us and we can help you narrow this down, because that should
Yeah.
be your goal for this week.
I'd also say when you're doing research, like be aware that there's going to be a lot of nuance in whatever argument you're talking about, that you're probably going to find a lot of things could, like, let's take homelessness in the Bay Area, like researching into that topic, there's going to be a lot of different things, a lot of different perspectives on like why this problem is happening and possible solutions that could be worked for this problem. So just kind of keep in mind like what for you in this paper is going to be like a good thing to focus on, or could it be like a couple solutions that you think like work together best for what you're talking about in this essay. Because very rarely when you're searching at something like this do you find like, here's the problem, here's the solution, done. Like this is why research takes so much time for this project.
Exactly. And the thing is like, you shouldn't know what the source of the problem is or the solution right now. That's why you have to do the research, right? Your place right now, once you kind of decide what you want to write about, is just like, here's what I'm curious about. Now I've got to find out about this, right? Like that's where the whole point of research is to go into something saying like, I don't know about this. Now I want to find out. Like, you don't want to go into it like, here's what I already know. I have all these different ideas. I know everything about this. And now I'm just going to write this paper. It's like, leave yourself open for this possibility of having your mind changed or of accepting these new ideas on this issue, right? So your task for this essay, right, is going to be demonstrating that the problem that you've selected exists by defining or analyzing the problem and then pose a solution. So you should provide enough contextual information to show your readers the scope of the problem and explain who or what is affected and how or why. So the readers to be able to see this problem, and we're going to work through all of these different pieces of this together. I've got sampled research papers that I'll be giving you examples of. Like, we're going to be chunking this up. So it's not just like, here's your research prompt, turn it into me in a handful of weeks. Like, do not even worry about that. Like, this is, I'm just kind of going on an overview of this research paper, but this is going to be stuff that we're going to be working on between now and the end of the semester. So most important, you will cite evidence from quality sources that will convince your reader the problem is serious and worthy of their attention. So using logical reasoning and credible evidence, your goal is to persuade your reader that your proposed solution is feasible and that it's better than the alternative solutions. So a strong proposal will anticipate and respond to the objections the reader might have and specifically explain how solutions should be implemented. So this essay, we're going to talk about this idea of like counter argument, right? And making sure that, like, throughout the semester, we talked about like your reader kind of being like this skeptical, like you have to convince your reader of your argument. And this is going to be especially true in the research paper. So this will definitely be coming as we move in through there. So this is your largest, most important essay of the semester. And everything that we've worked on together is going to come together here. So you're going to make sure that all your body paragraphs are well developed. Your essay is well organized. Each body paragraph develops and supports your thesis. You're going to have an introduction, right, with making a clear stand and controlled sentences throughout the essay. So you're going to be making sure that you're dealing with a paper that's some way or shape or form controversial or debatable, right? So your paper has to have a thesis, which will be proved through about a 5-page essay, right? So like, here's the direction that you're going. It's got to be something that like that you can argue, and it's going to be about a 5-page paper that you're going to be writing. So you're going to be supporting your claims with evidence from your research. Do not assume that your reader agrees with you, and don't make claims that aren't backed up in research, right? So it's not like, here's what I think, it's what can you prove to me based off of the articles that you found, right? And we're going to talk all about how to find those articles. And you've already done a lot of that work in LR10, right? And now we're going to be like utilizing that skill set that you built this semester to build this essay. Be sure that your essay answers the so what question and explain your thesis is important. And really kind of think about the organization of your essay. And again, I'll show you some examples of this and show you how to organize this essay. So here's what your paper should do. So your paper should have at least 4 sources total. And again, next week, we're going to talk about these sources and dive into how to be able to find these sources. 3 of these sources have to come from library research, right? So online databases, right? Like using something like, EBSCOhost, or using one of the online databases that are ERIC, or right, any of these kind of like online databases that we were able to pull from as we were going through the research component in LR10. The 4th source, I want to give you more freedom with that source. The additional source can be something, it can also be an online database if you want it to, but I want to give you that freedom to be able to use some sort of additional source that could be something like a documentary. It could be a TED Talk. It could be an episode of a podcast. It could be an interview. It could be a book that you found, right? It could be a life experience, maybe kind of going in, usually when we're face to face and, we're not kind of going through this drastic change to our classes because of COVID, I have you do some sort of life experience part of a research paper. That becomes much harder to do right now. So I've eliminated that piece of it. And I give you this freedom here to kind of think about this additional source. So for example, an interview could be really helpful. Like I had a student last semester who wrote a paper about a lot of the experiences that undocumented immigrants face in this country because of especially this was true, last semester when the student was writing this paper because of kind of like a lot of like the widespread kind of xenophobia or bias towards undocumented immigrants. And so as an example, they interviewed their parents, like because their parents lived through a lot of those life experiences. And so I thought that was just like a really heavy moment in the essay to give that essay a lot of pathos and a lot of emotion to be able to tap into that. I've had students use examples of watching a documentary, right? Sometimes like seeing something can do something in so much more of a powerful way than reading about it in an article can. So I just want to give that freedom of being able to use additional source. It's not just a printed article, like a podcast or a documentary or an interview or some kind of life experience. When we get to that point and you're in your research and you've selected your topic, I watch a lot of documentaries and listen to a lot of podcasts, and you might be able to, we could chat and I might be able to give a recommendation or help you find something that could work as that 4th source. So if that's the direction that you want to go, we can definitely talk about that. So the last piece of it, so those are your sources, is that you're going to be, working, we're talking about like framing those quotations and building up those ideas. And then the last part of it is like, this should be, like we talked about 5 pages, right? And I'll have some different samples, be about 1,250 words, and I'll show you kind of the breakdown. So the research project is going to be broken up into 4 kind of things that are going to be turning along the way. And the first one's going to be due this week and is the kind of the most manageable of all of them. And that's the research proposal. So along the way, each of these are going to have their own due dates. The research proposal is going to be due at the end of this week. So there's going to be the research proposal. There are going to be source reports, and the source reports, I'm going to introduce those next week and start talking about how you'll do those and how to start, writing those. And I'll give you a sample of them and how to turn them in and all that kind of stuff. But your source reports are basically your research, right? Like, here's an article you found, here's what it's about, here's how you're going to use it in your essay, right? Here you think it's effective, all that kind of stuff, right? The source reports I have along the way to keep on track with your research and really have you analyzing the things that you're finding to think about how you can apply it to the research paper. Next is the outline, right? Which is going to give you a kind of plan for here's the point to be addressing in my paper and the direction of how I'm going to go. And then last is going to be the final version research paper, which will be due at the end of the semester. So that means that this week, that you'll have to turn in is your research proposal, which is right here. So the proposal doesn't have to be super long, about a page or so, maybe a little bit less, but I don't think it should be much less than that to be able to answer this. But this should be what you're going to be focused on. And here's some questions to kind of help think about along the way. And you'll just turn this in on Canvas, and then I'll have it to be able to read through it, give you some kind of feedback, kind of let you know if you're on the right track about where you're going to go with what you're writing about. So here's some questions to think about to help you put this together. And you could just, if you wanted to, you could follow these exactly, kind of do question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and write them out. You could kind of just bring them all together and write a paragraph out, whatever works for you. These are just things that I want to know about the topic you're going to be choosing to explore. So number 1, describe the community that you're analyzing as thoroughly as you can for someone who is unfamiliar, so they can understand it. This is really important. Throughout the semester, I've been talking about this idea of assuming that your reader has not read the same thing that you have. Everything that I've assigned this semester, I've read, right? The research paper will not be true. The articles that you found, I haven't read those articles. There might be some small cases where you're referencing something that I've read before, but for the vast majority of the stuff that you're going to be finding and reading, I don't have a context for it. So this is really important, this idea of assuming your reader does not have the same context you do, because now you're in the position of expertise. You've done the research, you've read the articles, right? Now you have to explain this issue to somebody who does not have the same context you have, right? So describe the community so that somebody who's unfamiliar with it can understand it. What's it like to be a member of this community? How is this community viewed by the larger society, right? The next question is, what is the problem related to this community that you're analyzing? How does it impact the community that you just described? Next, who are all of the other communities or people or groups that have some sort of impact in this problem? What do you believe are some of the underlying causes of this problem, right? So for example, like the differentiation between who's experiencing this problem and who could also be, who are the main people that this problem is affecting, but there could also be people who are experiencing that problem kind of peripherally or, along with people. So like, for example, if I go back to that idea of looking at maybe like homelessness within the community or homelessness within Fairfield, obviously your paper could be focusing on the people who are in fact having to live on the street or camp out in tents along, a bike trail or something like that. But there could be additional people within the community who are also have some sort of impact related to this. These could be maybe business owners in the surrounding community. These could be members of the community that are, going out for walks, right? But this could also maybe relate to people who are working, I don't know, police officers within the community, right? There could be other people who are peripherally affected by this. I think that could be one of those places where you might want to say, like, here is kind of that root source or that root idea of people who are affected, but here's how it could affect people kind of stretching out beyond there. So that thing that you could explore for your essay or for this proposal. And what do you believe are some of the causes of this problem? Next, this one is just kind of open. What is your curiosity, right? What do you want to understand about the research in order to write this paper? So I think this is really important to think about, that like there's a lot of things about this topic that like you may not know, you're curious about. Here's why I'm interested in this, and that's what I want you to write about a little bit. What are you curious about? What do you want to find out along the way? And then also for the fifth one, what do you already know about this topic or issue? You selected this topic because it's a direction you might want to go as a career choice. Maybe it's something that you have a little bit interest in already. What do you want to learn about this topic or issue? And then also for number 5, what do you already know about it? So this is your proposal, right? It's about, I imagine, 3/4 of a page to a page long, right? These 5 questions to really kind of get you thinking about, here's what I'm going to be focusing on for this research paper. If you don't know, right, after get some thought, kind of thinking about it, like, I don't really know what I want to write about, or I have an idea, I'm thinking between these 2 things, please talk to us. I have my office hour available on Thursday. You can also just send me just a quick email. Hey, here's what I'm thinking of a topic for my research paper. What do you think? And we can talk that way. Chris is going to be he'll be announcing in our announcements, doing his Friday workshop. There's been times where I've had students be like, I haven't started the research paper because I don't know what I'm going to be writing about. Please don't do that. Like, the research proposal at the end of this week is super important, because without having your direction of where you're going to go for your research paper, or at least that kind of like general, like, here's what I'm thinking about focusing on, that's going to set you behind really far, right? So this week, that should be in addition to finishing Trevor Noah's book. Oh yeah, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
If you're If you're struggling finding a community that to think about, or like a problem that you want to focus on, or even if you have a problem and you're like, I'm not sure it's going to work for this paper, those are all things you can come forward on Friday for us to like come and talk about. Like any kind of difficulty issue you're having with the research project, with the proposal, like come forward on Friday. And if Friday doesn't work for you, shoot me an email, shoot Jose an email, see him during his office hours on Thursday, because it's going to be important that we figure out that we get like some idea of where we're going forward
Mhm.
this week, because like again, like I said, like doing all the research for this is a long process.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like we want to just work through this process. We got time, right? We got little assignments along the way to just kind of work through it. So for this week, the big things:
Yeah.
finish Trevor Noah's book, right? And get this research project proposal set, right? Like turn this in, because then we can, from there, we'll start finishing up SA3, right? We'll start working on the research along the way, just kind of always there, checking in with it, building along with it. And so we're just going to kind of chunk at a time, work our way through this. Again, if you have any questions, shoot me an email Chris, stop by my office hours, stop by Chris's workshop on Friday, and we'll work through this together.